Introducing first the very worthy challenger from St. Louis, 234 pounds, the Iceman King, Parsons.
King Bailey Parsons Jr. was born in St. Louis, Missouri on June 11, 1950. Growing up in the gateway to the West, Parsons became a fan of pro wrestling, with his favorites including Lou Thesz, Pat O'Connor, Rufus R. Jones, and later Rocky Johnson. Despite excelling in sports like football and boxing and being a champion wrestler while in high school, Parsons opted not to go to college and eventually joined his father and his older brother as a dump truck driver through the 1970s. As the decade was drawing to a close, the family saw some good opportunities in that profession in the Houston, Texas area and decided to relocate. That turned out to be a decision that inadvertently opened the door for Parsons to get into pro wrestling. In early 1979, Parsons was happy making $700 to $800 a week driving a dump truck when a chance meeting with a wrestler named Bill White led to an opportunity at Stardom. Parsons was just over 300 pounds at the time, and White saw him as a potential pro wrestling star, telling the former high school champion he could get him a meeting with Houston promoter Paul Bosch. Parsons didn't take the offer seriously, but just a couple of weeks later, White came through for him and took him to Bosch's office. After Parsons proved to Bosch that his champion wrestling credentials were legitimate, Bosch agreed to put Parsons into training with veteran wrestler Nick Kozak, who decided not to smarten Parsons up to the business, even after he had been booked for his first match. According to Parsons, his first match was in February of 1979 in Shreveport, Louisiana against Tank Patton, who defeated the rookie in almost 10 minutes, in what was apparently a legitimate wrestling match. Despite the loss, Parsons was thrilled with his $75 payday. A month later, Parsons was booked in Corpus Christi against Maniac Mark Lewin, managed by Gary Hart. Lewin absolutely destroyed Parsons, busting his head open and beating him all the way back to the dressing room when the match was over. It was the first time Parsons started thinking this wasn't a business for him, but thanks to Lewin, it was also the first time he was smartened up to the fact that pro wrestling was work and matches were supposed to be predetermined. Lewin gave the then 29-year-old Parsons some pointers on how to move in the ring and work with his opponent, help that came in handy as Parsons moved closer to life as a full-time pro wrestler. By the summer of 1979, Parsons was part of the roster in the Pacific Northwest Wrestling based in Portland, Oregon. The Pacific Northwest was a great place for young wrestlers to hone their skills, as it was a small territory with dedicated fans, but didn't get the national attention some other territories might get. It also gave Parsons and other up-and-coming wrestlers a chance to work with established stars like Rowdy Roddy Piper, Buddy Rose, and Stan Stasiak. Parsons made two notable connections in the territory: Johnny Mantell, who had come to Portland earlier in the year after a run in Japan, and one of his favorite wrestlers, Rocky Johnson. After working his way up the ranks over the next 2 years, including some short stints in Vancouver, the Carolinas, and Tri-State Wrestling, Parsons got his first taste of gold. Parsons and Rocky Johnson won the Pacific Northwest Tag Team Championship from Buddy Rose and Stan Stasiak on November 28, 1981, at the Sports Arena in Portland. The title reign would only last 49 days, with the pair dropping the belts to Matt Bourne and Rip Oliver in January 1982, which started a brief feud between the two teams as Johnson and Parsons tried to get the belts back. The title reign and the feud were a stepping stone to bigger things to come for Parsons. By May of 1982, Parsons had moved on to the Mid-Atlantic territory on a more full-time basis. Parsons was quick to find success along with new tag team partner Porkchop Cash. Parsons and Cash won the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championship from Don Kernodle and Jim Nelson on May 31, 1982 in Wilmington, North Carolina, but this title reign would also be a short one. Ole Anderson was replaced by Wahoo McDaniel as Booker in the Mid-Atlantic territory, and keeping the belts on Parsons and Cash were not part of his plans. McDaniel wanted to get the belts on Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, but wasn't interested in a program between the two babyface teams. Parsons even pitched the idea for he and Cash to turn heel and eventually dropped the belts to Steamboat and Youngblood, an idea that was endorsed by the likes of Jack Briscoe, but McDaniel had them drop the belts back to Kernodle and Nelson after just 13 days. Parsons and Cash would feud with Kernodle and Nelson through the summer, having several rematches and always falling short of getting the belts back. By early 1983, it was clear to both Parsons and Cash that they had gone as far as they were going to go in Mid-Atlantic and began looking elsewhere to continue their careers. Porkchop Cash contacted promoters in the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association and worked a deal for them to come into the territory as the Bruise Brothers, a takeoff on the popular movie The Blues Brothers starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. Parsons wasn't sure the gimmick would go over, but if no other opportunities came along, there wouldn't be much choice. 2 days later, an opportunity that would change the course of his career did, in fact, come along. As he was finishing up commitments in Mid-Atlantic, Parsons received a phone call from Johnny Mantell, who had left Portland and joined his brother Ken, who is now the booker for World Class Championship Wrestling in Dallas. Mantell encouraged Parsons to forget about going to Memphis and come to the Dallas area where things were hot thanks to the Von Erich-Freebird feud. With a choice between an iffy Bruise Brothers gimmick in Memphis and going to a territory that was exploding in popularity based just 3.5 hours from home, it was an easy choice for Parsons to make. But he wanted to change a few things before he made his world-class debut. Instead of simply coming to the ring wearing a pair of boots with KP on the side, King Parsons wanted to spice up his appearance and presentation. For him, that started with a nickname. That nickname came on the spur of the moment while sharing a room with Jimmy Valiant on a road trip when Parsons leaned against an ice machine. Valiant pointed at him and said, "That's your new name, Iceman." A trip to the barber, a headband, and some new ring attire soon followed and gave Parsons the look world-class fans would come to know very well. Iceman King Parsons made his world-class debut on February 18, 1983 at the Sportatorium in Dallas, entering the ring the Sister Sledge's We Are Family and making short work of Armand Hussein. With his high energy and butt-butt finishing maneuver, Iceman was an instant hit with fans and quickly became one of the most popular babyfaces in the territory. His popularity escalated when the Von Erichs publicly embraced and endorsed the St. Louis native. Parsons told Booker Ken Mantell if he didn't allow his shoulders to be pinned for 3 months, he would help blow the territory into the stratosphere. True to his word, Mantell didn't have Parsons lose a match for 3 months, as he defeated the likes of Wild Bill Irwin, Terry Gordy, and the Great Kabuki. Parsons also won the World Class Television Championship during this time, as well as several tag matches as he partnered with Kevin Carey and David Von Erich at different times against the Freebirds. The run established Parsons as one of the top babyfaces in the territory, maybe even the top babyface not named Von Erich. Any good babyface needs a good feud with a heel. Buddy Roberts of the Freebirds provided that when Roberts cut off a piece of Iceman's braids, leading to a hair versus hair match at the Star Wars of Wrestling in June 1983. The loser of the match would have their hair taken off using the infamous Freebird hair crane. Iceman would actually lose the match when Roberts grabbed a handful of trunks for leverage to get the pin. As referee David Manning tried to sort things out, Parsons grabbed the hair cream and rubbed it on Roberts' head, before turning away and enraged Michael Hayes entering the ring. For weeks, Roberts wore boxing headgear to hide his bald head, claiming he did not lose his hair and had sustained an injury requiring the headgear. Parsons continued to establish himself as one of the top babyface stars, even earning a shot at the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Harley Race on October 7, 1983 at the Sportatorium. Parsons had David Von Erich in his corner for the match and got several near pinfalls against the champion. It even looked like Iceman had won the World Championship for a moment, but outside interference from David wound up getting Parsons disqualified. Even with the disappointing ending, the match further solidified Parsons as one of the most popular faces in the territory. With a small roster of regular wrestlers in world class, Parsons' popularity also translated into success in the tag team division. Something that would fit right in with another feud as Parsons took on members of Skandor Akbar's Devastation Incorporated. At the 1983 Thanksgiving Star Wars event held at Reunion Arena in Dallas, Parsons teamed with Junkyard Dog as they took on the American Tag Team Champion Super Destroyers in a title match. At one point, Parsons was thrown into the ring post, busting his head open and forcing officials to take him to the back. JYD fought on his own for a few minutes, but then irate Iceman returned to the ring and started cleaning house, even pulling Akbar into the ring. Suddenly, with Super Destroyer number 2 holding Iceman, Akbar produced a fireball that burned Iceman's face.
Akbar made a flamethrower on Iceman King Parsons.
The fireball sent Iceman on a mission to not only get revenge on Akbar, but also take what he could from the Super Destroyers. Iceman even teamed with Andre the Giant when the Superstar came in for an appearance, much to the dismay of Akbar and his stable. There was some payback doled out at the 1983 Christmas Star Wars card when Iceman teamed with Brian Adias to win the American Tag Team Championship from the Super Ds at Reunion Arena. The taste of revenge wouldn't last long, however, as Parsons and Adias lost the belts back to the Super Ds just over a month later in Fort Worth. That title loss was followed by a 5-minute match between Parsons and Akbar, in which Akbar quickly jumped into the ring to take advantage of a wearied Iceman, leaving Parsons less than satisfied. The feud with Akbar and the Super Ds took another turn when Iceman and Buck Zumhofe formed Rockin' Soul and set their sights not only on the American Tag Team Championship, but on the Super Ds' masks. After Parsons and Zumhofe defeated the Super Ds for the tag titles at the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions at Texas Stadium on May 6, 1984, a rematch was set for May 21st at Will Rogers Memorial Auditorium in Fort Worth. If the Super Ds won, they got the belts back. If Iceman and Zumhofe won, the Super Ds would lose their masks. Through the summer of 1984, Parsons and Zumhofe would battle the Irwins over the American Tag Belts, winning them back at the 1984 Independence Day Star Wars card at Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth. That reign lasted almost 3 months, before Rockin' Soul dropped the belts back to the Irwins in September 1984. As had, Parsons made appearances in other territories while based there. Iceman traveled to Mid-South on and off and made appearances in Houston and his native St. Louis, even challenging Harley Race for the Missouri Heavyweight Championship. By the beginning of 1985, Parsons was wrestling almost exclusively for Mid-South, continuing his feud with Skandor Akbar in matches against Kamala and tagging with Butch Reed against members of Akbar's stable. It culminated in a cage match as Iceman tagged with Reed and Hacksaw Jim Duggan against Kamala, Hercules Hernandez, and Ted DiBiase in Alexandria, Louisiana. By June, Iceman was back in World Class on a more full-time basis and quickly won the World Class Television Championship, as well as taking the American Heavyweight Championship from Chris Adams at the Sportatorium on July 5th of that year. His American title reign would be an impressive one, lasting 122 days before dropping the belt back to Rude on November 4th in Fort Worth. The title loss to Rude would be a significant one, as it was the last time the American Heavyweight Championship changed hands. In February 1986, World Class broke away from the National Wrestling Alliance and became the World Class Championship Wrestling Association, recognizing Rude as its first world champion. In late 1986, Iceman returned to what was the Mid-South Territory, now known as the Universal Wrestling Federation, which was the first step in big changes for Parsons. After a handful of failed attempts to take the UWF World Tag Team Championship from Bill Irwin and Leroy Brown with both Terry Taylor and Chavo Guerrero as his partner, Iceman partnered with Chris Adams in February 1987 in a tournament to crown new UWF World Tag Team Champions as the belts had been vacated. Iceman and Adams made it to the semifinals against fellow babyfaces Ted DiBiase and Steve Williams in the tournament held in Fort Worth. DiBiase and Williams had been feuding with one of Iceman's former foes, Skandor Akbar, who sent his men to ringside during the match to attack DiBiase and Williams. Adams went outside the ring to assist DiBiase and Williams, but a protesting Iceman, who was the legal man in the match, stayed in the ring as a referee counted out Williams. A conflict between Iceman and Adams followed as Adams wanted to restart the match, but Parsons wanted to take the win and go to the finals. Feeling they couldn't go on together as a team, the UWF had a coin toss to determine which of the two would go on to the finals with a new partner. Adams won the coin toss and chose Savannah Jack. When Iceman protested, Savannah Jack came in as a peacemaker and insisted Iceman talk to Adams to work things out. At first, Iceman seemed willing, but suddenly attacked Savannah Jack. Adams would eventually go to the finals with Terry Taylor as his partner, winning the belts over Rick Steiner and Steen. Parsons would go on to the first real heel turn of his career. Parsons briefly joined forces with Eddie Gilbert's Hot Stuff Incorporated as he tagged with Gilbert and Sting in attempts to win the UWF Tag Team Championship, but was never successful. Iceman also feuded with Savannah Jack, having a series of street fight matches. Iceman's new heel persona also brought about a new look, complete with what he called his Rudy Poot stick, which evidently caught the attention of one future wrestler. Not sure whatever happened to him, though. By the end of 1987, Iceman was back in Dallas, wrestling for the outlaw promotion Wild West Wrestling, and in the unusual position of teaming with his one-time foe, Buddy Roberts. Parsons, Roberts, and Terry Gordy, along with the Angel of Death, would form a new version of the Fabulous Freebirds and return to World Class to give WCWA fans their first look at the new Iceman. The feuds practically set themselves up as Iceman battled former friends like the Von Erichs and Chris Adams, as well as former Freebird Michael Hayes. On January 4th, 1988, the new Freebirds won the heralded World Class Six-Man Tag Team Championship from Chris Adams, Steve Simpson, and Matt Bourne, who was filling in for Kevin Von Erich. That 6-month reign came to an end with the unusual combination of Kerry and Kevin Von Erich with Michael Hayes defeating Parsons, Roberts, and Kamala, who was substituting for Gordy on July 8, 1988. The Six-Man Tag Team Championship was deactivated shortly thereafter. While the new Freebirds were having trouble connecting with fans and stirring up the interest of the original group, Parsons was still excelling as a singles wrestler. Iceman reached what could be considered the pinnacle of his career on March 25, 1988, when he faced world-class world champion Kerry Von Erich in a title match at the Sportatorium. At one point, Black Bart, who had been associated with the Freebirds in recent weeks, came to ringside. Hoping to prevent him from interfering, Michael Hayes also came to ringside. Terry Gordy appeared, making a cut-it-off motion with his right hand. Suddenly, the lights in the arena went out. When they came back on, Gordy, Bart, and Hayes were all gone, and Von Erich was motionless in the middle of the ring. Parsons took an easy pinfall to win the World Championship. Though the initial reaction was that Hayes must have conspired with his former Freebird partner, that was put to rest when the bloodied Hayes was found unconscious in the dressing room. Though rarely given the recognition, Parsons was only the third black wrestler recognized as an organization's World Heavyweight Champion, following Bearcat Wright and Bobo Brazil, who both won the WWA World Championship in the 1960s. Parsons' title reign would only last 44 days, with Iceman losing the belt back to Kerry Von Erich at the final Memorial Parade of Champions card held at Texas Stadium on May 8, 1988. As the merger between World Class and the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association was on the horizon, what would eventually become the USWA, Parsons was still a major player in the title picture. After a few unsuccessful attempts to win the AWA World Championship from Jerry Lawler, Parsons would go on to win the Texas Heavyweight Championship from Kevin Von Erich in August 1988. Parsons would hold that title until February of 1989, when he lost it to Brickhouse Brown, the man who shortly thereafter turned heel and joined forces with Iceman to form a tag team they called the Blackbirds. The partnership between Parsons and Brown would be short-lived, and Brown was replaced by Action Jackson, but the Blackbirds still failed to take off. Parsons would have a decent feud with Skip Young, but with the Memphis office taking control with the USWA, it became clear that many of the old world-class wrestlers were going to be put in the background. Even the Von Erichs were being pushed to the side in favor of the likes of Eric Embry and a young up-and-coming wrestler named Steve Austin. As the 1990s came, Parsons would stay active in smaller organizations like Herb Albert's UWF, where he feuded with Colonel De Beers, and the Dallas-based Global Wrestling Federation. Iceman even worked a few World Championship Wrestling house shows in 1993. By the late 1990s, Iceman was semi-retired, and in 2005, at the age of 55, had what we thought would be his final match at Extreme Championship Wrestling's Halloween Doom when he lost to Action Jackson. However, that would not be Iceman's last time in the ring, as he continued to pop up from time to time. In 2018, at the age of 68, Iceman laced up his boots one more time for a World Class Revolution event at Apogee Stadium in Denton, Texas. Parsons tagged with Kevin Von Erich's sons Ross and Marshall, with Kerry's daughter Lacey at ringside, in a 6-man tag team match against the Aero Club in Tatanka. Parsons and the Von Erichs came out victorious. Iceman briefly had an online presence on platforms like Twitter and Instagram, but has been very quiet the last couple of years. An odd thing to say about someone that made as much noise as Parsons did when he hit the scene in World Class.
Maniac! Maniac. Slick, as they call it. Gary Hart, you understand? That's right, and the freak. The freak of nature. Yes, sir. I love it. Maniac, you belong to me. See, you do like you do when you're in Rome. Anything you want to do, baby, come Monday, you bring it on, because I'm ready to deal with it. And Friday night, freak of nature, I'm going to be packing, baby. And I'm going to be packing, you understand? I got a surprise for you, freak of nature. Like Mama says, it be that way sometime. Have mercy.